They weren't rich, not by a long shot. In fact, poverty had them by the throat, oppressed, afflicted, and overlooked. These people had every reason to hoard what little they had. They didn't live in Jerusalem. They weren't the religious elite. No temple adorned their city. No priest called them chosen. They were Macedonians. Now, maybe you've heard of Macedonia. It was the stomping ground of Alexander the Great, sure. But this story takes place long after the days of empire and conquest, when Rome ruled and Christians suffered. The churches of Macedonia, Philippi, Thessalonica, Berea, had been planted by a traveling tent maker named Paul. He had been beaten in their streets, chased from their synagogues, and locked in their jails. But somehow, their hearts were open, not just to the gospel, but to giving. Paul later wrote about them to the wealthier believers in Corinth. He said, "Out of the most severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity." Wait, let me say that again. Severe trial, extreme poverty, overflowing joy, rich generosity. Now, that's not an equation that the world understands. But the Macedonians didn't just give what they could. No, Paul said they gave beyond their ability. They begged for the privilege of helping others. Why? Because they understood. They understood what it means to be saved by grace. They understood what it meant to be included in a family bigger than blood. They gave not because they had much, but because they had everything in Christ. One of those churches, Philippi, sent support to Paul again and again. They funded his mission. They refreshed his soul. And when he sat in a Roman prison facing death, it was a Macedonian named Epaphroditus who risked his life to deliver a gift. The Corinthians had the wealth, but the Macedonians had the heart. And to this day, they stand as an example not of abundance, but of sacrifice, not of comfort, but of commitment, not of fame, but of faith. Because you see, God doesn't count coins, He measures hearts. The story of the Macedonians reminds us of a beautiful truth. God's greatest work is often displayed not in plenty, but in poverty. Not in what we keep, but in what we give. The world teaches us that joy comes when we get more, but the Macedonians proved the opposite. True joy comes when we give more, especially when it costs us something. Their generosity wasn't rooted in wealth, but in worship. It wasn't about the size of their pockets, but in the size of their faith. They gave beyond their ability because they believed beyond their circumstances. They saw themselves not as victims of poverty, but as vessels of grace. And in doing so, they left behind a legacy that still speaks. Faith is not measured in comfort, but in commitment. Love is not proven by convenience, but by sacrifice. If God could use the poverty of Macedonia to enrich the world with generosity, imagine what He can do with the little we place in His hands. When we give our time, our talent, our treasure, our hearts, God multiplies it into something eternal. So let the Macedonians inspire us. We may not always have abundance to give, but we always have the choice to give abundantly. For when we do, we reflect the very heart of Christ, who gave Himself fully that we might have life. And now that you know the rest of this story, you have a story to tell.